Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Insurance Leadership Podcast. I'm Ryan Eaton, your host, and I'm excited to have you with us today. We have Chad Hogan, who is the president of Quotit, one of the nation's largest online enrollment systems in the country, here to be able to talk on ACA quoting and enrollment platforms and tools that agents can use to be able to better help manage their fourth quarter business. So let's go ahead and jump into it today. Chad, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you, Ryan. Glad to be here.
How's everything been your way?
You know, we're getting ready for open enrollment. It's been a great year leading up to it. Lots of regulatory changes, both on the ACA side and Medicare. And so we're busy and we're excited. Looking forward to a great open enrollment this year. Man,
that's awesome. Well, look, in the intro, I mentioned that you're the president of Quotit. I'd love to kind of give people a little bit more background into you personally, kind of maybe tell us about you, your family for a minute, where you live,
Sure.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah, happy to do so. Been with the organization now since early on. So with Quotit since not the very beginning, but it was an early employee in the process, and have grown with the company. And eventually they trusted me to run the thing. So here I am, about 20 years later, and giving it our best every day. We're now part of the Allstate Corporation after our prior owner, National General, was acquired. National General Insurance was acquired by Allstate, and so we're proud to be part of the Good Hands family. I've got my blue shirt on and really enjoying that. A little bit about me personally: married, 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, 14, 12, 10, and 8. And they love baseball, love soccer. So that's what my weekends are filled with when not delving into the health insurance space. And we live in a little town outside of Boise, Idaho by the name of Eagle, Idaho. And so been there for a couple of years now. Prior to that, we were based out of Southern California, Orange County area. So a little bit about myself there.
Oh, right? I love it. Now, tell me this. With Quotit, Quotit was previously owned, I believe, by Word and Brown back in the day. Is that right?
Yeah, so Quotit's gone through a number of kind of organizational ownerships over the years. So originally when I joined, it was a bootstrap company founded by an insurance agent by the name of David Smithson, who was in the Southern California market and was tired of getting floppy disks, if we remember those, from insurance companies with small group rates on it. And so there's got to be a better way to run group illustrations. And so started compiling that data from some local carriers in the California market. And that was really the first Quotit product that went to market, was a small group quoting platform in the California market. Soon expanded in the individual space, the under 65 market, and then did a little bit in the med sub space. Quotit was then acquired a few years after I joined by Word and Brown as a general agency, large group and individual and Medicare general agency in the California market. We had a really good run there with them for a number of years, and then National General came knocking on the door. National General Insurance, owned by the Carfunkel family, there came and knocked on the door of John Word and Rusty Brown and said, "Hey, we love what you're doing, and we need a platform, and we think it's just best if we buy it from you." And so they did, and we became part of the National General family of companies, and been a part of supporting much of their growth and initiatives on the individual market. And then most recently, as National General was acquired by Allstate, as I mentioned kind of in the intro there, Ryan, we're now part of the Good Hands Allstate family of companies.
Well, what was it like in those beginning days? I know you weren't there at the very beginning, but you were one of the beginning employees. Yeah. Obviously, your system, for those people who don't know, is so robust, does so many different things, and touching so many different carriers and access for all 50 states. I mean, it's just amazing what all you're doing. What was it like at the beginning, getting that set up? I mean, like, how many programmers did you have? What was kind of that first thing? Hey, we're doing small group rates in this zip code. I mean, how did that expansion work?
Well, I mean, our growth was organic, right? We were a bootstrap company, as I mentioned. So prior to joining Word and Brown, it was really, we grew through organic, right? So we grew through adding additional agencies and customers. We had some early general agencies that jumped on board and said, "Hey, we want to do this. We want to offer this service." And this is when general agencies were still going out to carriers and getting rates direct for every RFP, even if it was a 5-life group. And so, that expansion in the California market, naturally went into individual. And then actually about a year after I joined, I helped kind of lead our charge to expand beyond the state of California. Texas was one of the first ones, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois. We started going through that. It really became doing a road show with the carriers, and myself and one of our, at the time, carrier relations manager, we went out and we did a road show. And I flew all over the country talking with carriers, convincing them that they wanted to trust us to distribute their health plan data, right? And keep in mind, a lot of this was pre-ACA. So, and with the exception of some areas in California, it was a guaranteed issue, right? So there were rating algorithms involved. There was proprietary data that was there. There were NDAs that were, this thick, and data embargoes, and it was a whole different world pre-ACA. And it's an area that we knew really well, and it served us well as we've continued to expand into ancillary product lines and things like that.
Would you say that was one of your biggest challenges when you guys were getting off the ground, is the time it took to go get with each carrier, get the non-disclosures into play, then get them to trust you and build that relationship enough? I mean, especially when you talk about the Blues and each state's kind of got their own, or the different carriers that are state specific, that had to have been a challenge.
It absolutely is. And, when you're in a market, your greatest advocate are your customers. They're your agents and brokers who you partner with. And so we often took an approach of finding or working with an agent or broker that had a established place in that market, whether it was in the group market, the Medicare market, and we went to the carrier and said, hey, we want to do this. We're a tech company. Here's our pedigree. We want to do this to support, Ryan's agency. And, Ryan produced a significant amount of business with that carrier, and that carrier was willing to, devote resources to us. So carrier distribution, carrier network is really the key, to our success over time. Now, I'll tell you, when ACA came along and you start introducing all of the transparency rules and rate filing rules and those kind of things, it really changed kind of the dynamics in the industry, where you can now, in essence, just connect to an API from CMS and have a 35-foot state footprint overnight with all the rates, plans, benefits, product, everything that's there, going through some regulatory changes, which is why we still continue to have and really are the only platform that's going to offer that off exchange and ancillary footprint in addition to on exchange, because we have those direct relationships with 180 plus carriers representing 300 plus plans in a variety of markets. And so that's part of the value we bring to carriers, is that distribution network that we can cover.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about as well, was the value that you do bring to carriers. Obviously, you bring distribution because you have so many agents using your platform all over the place. Yeah. But I have to assume from the carrier standpoint, also, they love getting clean data from you. They're not getting paper apps that they're having to process. They're getting it electronically. They're taking it directly into their system. You've scrubbed it to make sure it's clean data. I mean, what do you hear from carriers on that side? Is that one of the big things for them now, is how can we get all this information in and get the information in, but also get it clean?
Early on, that was a huge advantage for carriers. They wanted electronic enrollment, right? And they were incentivizing brokers. They used to run promos. Hey, $5 for every electronic enrollment you run through. I'm sure you remember some of those days, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like, we're going to charge you $5 for every paper app you submit. It's kind of flipped on its head there. But one of the critical things also that we see for distribution is, especially in ancillary space or other areas where you have a product that's got a compelling value proposition for a consumer and it really meets a need, but a lot of agents aren't aware of that product. And so we can provide that shelf space for a carrier to put their product out there for it to get in front of an agent in really kind of a no hassle way. The agent can run a quote and they can see that product compared to other plans in the market. And, if there's either a pricing advantage or a benefit advantage, they can see that through our shopping UI and be able to kind of have a broader stable of products to offer. One of the studies we did a number of years ago looked at a variety of agents' book of business prior to using Quotit and then after they did. And we looked at the concentration, and we found that on average, agents wrote with 2.2 carriers, meaning they had a primary carrier they wrote with and they had a backup, right? And those were the only two they wrote. And maybe that, that point two was a customer asked about something, or they had that carrier with a prior employer, or whatever the case may be. Afterwards, we found that book of business diversified by almost 2x, and that the agents started writing with, on average, just under 4 carriers their business because the product was out there. So, that's a double-edged sword for us, because sometimes we walk into a dominant market where, like a Blue of North Carolina, they own the market, right? And it's tough to convince them, hey, you want to be put up against the other carriers in your market. But in an area where you've got a competitive, like a California or a Texas or other markets where it's very competitive, we can bring an advantage to that carrier, because agents will look at the product or get the details of that product that they wouldn't normally take the extra steps to do, because all of that rate and benefit information is right in front of them in a single comparison screen, versus going out to 3 or 4 or 5 different carriers' sites. They're just not going to spend that time.
No, I love that. And I want to get to that in a minute when we talk about the value to agents, because I do see that as being just a time saver. Go to one spot instead of logging into 4 or 5 portals. That's huge. You mentioned something a minute ago when you were talking about, pinging CMS and being able to get everything. Walk through, there's a lot of people probably listening to this that are not familiar with APIs and kind of what that process is.
Sure.
If you're like me from Mississippi, you can spell API, but you have no idea what it means, right? So
Right.
Walk us through and kind of let us be able to hear a little bit, but kind of how you access the data through APIs.
Yeah, so we're kind of unique in that sense that we, from Quotit standpoint, we don't actually leverage the APIs that are made available publicly in the marketplace, and there's a number of reasons for it. One is that most of the data that's made available of an API, and for those that you just said don't understand exactly what an API is, you can think of it as it's a machine-to-machine connection to transfer data. API stands for Application Programming Interface. And so that could be as simple as me sending into the CMS computer, here's the demographics of the individual I want to quote for, and then them returning that data back to me. That's not necessarily how some of the CMS APIs work. They're more give me the data, and then they send you a big bulk of that data, right? And then you have to kind of figure out and massage it and bring it in. What we have done is we partner direct with the carriers to provide us that data for 2 reasons. One, those carriers can often provide us that data earlier than it's available through the federal APIs. And 2, we can get a richer data set. The data that is filed with CMS uses a certain standardized format, and it's really designed from a regulatory standpoint first and foremost, not a marketing standpoint. So there's additional benefit data, additional kind of clarity around the context, because maybe we can support 300 characters or 500 characters in a benefit descriptor versus 150. So what we can do is we can get a richer data set from the carriers that way. But the trade-off is that costs us, right? We have to maintain that data differently. We have a team that does that versus, a variety of connections that can be made to public data sources.
But because you can do that, you can display more information, which would help the consumer or the agent make it a better decision on the plan. Did I hear that correctly?
Exactly.
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome.
So because we can get a richer data set, or other things like plan brochures, SBC documents, other kinds of things that having a direct relationship with the carrier can afford us.
So I'm gonna ask you this, it's a kind of teach you a little bit. What is your favorite feature about your platform? Obviously, you got the ability to be able to grab all the data and pull everything, and I'm gonna ask you about agent type stuff in a minute. But if you had to say from a development side, maybe from a carrier side, something that you see that you guys feel like you do the best job in the market, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, I think where we have really been able to create a competitive advantage for brokers that use our platform is through the use of our consolidated enrollment. And what that really is the ability to have a true e-commerce shopping experience where a consumer can select a health plan, a dental plan, a vision plan, an accident critical illness plan, add them all into the cart, and complete one enrollment without having to re-enter their name 5 times or answer the same, do you live at this address question 5 times, and bring it through kind of a single streamlined end-to-end enrollment where at the end we're going to transmit that electronically to all 5 different carriers. But for the agent, they had a single process. For the consumer, they had a singular process. And if you're talking to a bunch of customers during open enrollment, or you're a call center that's driving on call efficiency or whatever the case may be, again, it comes back to the quoting piece, right? Why would I go to 3 or 4 or 5 different carrier sites when I'm only going to sell 2? Why would I sell a customer 2, 3, 4, or 5 products if it's going to cost me 5x the time? So I think kind of the killer app feature is some of our consolidated enrollment capabilities.
Well, too, if you're dealing, even if you're in the small group sector right now, we kind of talked about at the beginning, you mentioned getting the floppy disk for a 5-man group, but having to go back to the carrier, but being able to do that with 2 or 3 dental plans or 2 or 3 critical illness plans or 2 or 3 whatever, and be able to put all that data together, then be able to have a streamlined app. You're right. That is a huge value add. So agents who say, hey, that sounds awesome. What does it take to get them set up? I know there's a lot of platforms out there in the market. Some charge monthly fees, some take part of your commission, some will give you just referral fees for apps you submit. How does the Quotit process work for that?
Yeah, so we operate as a software as a service, meaning that we're going to charge a license fee on a per user basis for access to our platform. And with that, you get access to not only your on exchange, which, as you mentioned, there's definitely some out there that offer those capabilities for free or in exchange for a commission or whatever the case may be. The other piece of it would be you get access to the off exchange market. You get access to the ancillary, the dental, vision, accident, critical illness, all those other products that can complete it. And really, it's just a simple sign-up process online. You get a username and password. You can go in and you can, in theory, start running quotes. Now, the off-exchange market and ancillary market work a little bit different when you go to enroll. Not every carrier uses the NPN or some of those things that the federal government standardized as part of the ACA on-exchange enrollments. So there's a bit of setup where you'll need to provide your writing IDs. We can pull your license numbers and all that data from NIPR and preload some of that data, but there's always going to be a little bit of setup that has to be done. And it's a CRM or agency management, so you'll probably want to import your book of business, import your client data, those kind of things. But we have a team that does a one-on-one with any broker that comes on board. They'll walk them through that implementation, help them get set up and running. And then, of course, we provide live toll-free support for our brokers to call in and ask questions. I know that's a novel concept. There's a number of entities out there that want to push people to chat or email or open a ticket, but you can actually pick up the phone and call and talk to one of our support individuals who will either walk you through that scenario or help you figure out why what you're trying to do isn't working the way you expect it to.
No, I like that. So 2 questions I have around that is, and it's a loaded question because I know every user is different, but if you kind of had to give maybe an average time on, take someone to go in and implement everything, and then what's kind of the time you see to take to get where people get proficient using the system, right? Because like I can sign up for a new bank account, but I might not figure out their bill pay as quickly as I did my other one, or something may be different in there. How long does it take to get proficient? And then how long does it take to implement on an average?
Yeah, so I think from kind of an implementation standpoint, you're probably looking at 4 to 8 hours of work. Again, depending upon how many markets you're in. Right? If you're in a single market selling just a single insurance type, you're going to be on the lower end. You might even be an hour, maybe 2 hours of work. If you're going to sell in 45 states, you've got writing IDs from 15 different carriers, it's going to take a little bit more effort, right? And that you're going to be on the upper end of that, and you're probably not going to sit down and do that in an 8-hour chunk, right? But we have tools like, for example, we have an upload sheet where you can fill out the data and then just upload it into the system to make it easy to do that. So, it's an investment in your business. And what we have found is agents that implement or should purchase and don't go in there and implement their information and things, they typically drop off the platform within about 60 to 90 days. And we know, we can look at the statistics, we know how many times they log in, whether they put their data in or not, and they drop off in about 90 days. The agents that go in, they start adopting, they start implementing, and this kind of gets to your up to speed curve, right? Super simple to run a quote. It's very straightforward process. Those that kind of get past that 90-day, they stay on the platform for years. Like 5, 6, 7 years, they're a customer on our platform because it becomes a part of their business, no separate than their cell phone or anything else. It's a way in which they conduct their business, and it's a mindset in which they conduct their business.
Oh, that's funny you say that, because we got a CRM system years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago now. We all started using it, and we had other CRM companies come to us and talk, hey, this is what ours does, and theirs were way better. But it was one of those things, we had already adopted the one system, and it was kind of scared of change. It was like, man, the work time to get in. So I could definitely see that once an agent starts using it and is comfortable with it, why would they leave if they can get everything in one spot? So that.
And to harken back a little bit to your prior question, in terms of how agents pay for our services and things like that. So we're purely a technology provider. So we don't participate in a hierarchy. We don't take commissions. We don't take override, any of those kind of things. You pay us our monthly fee, and our loyalty is to you as the broker. We don't share that data with anybody. We don't monetize that data in any way. It is your data, and it's your client information.
And because of that, the carriers will be paying the agents the commission, correct? So all that still works the same way. It's just the way
100%.
of quoting, handling the applications, getting it to the carriers for them, and then everything else is the normal process. Customer service, commissions, all that.
Exactly. And when you talk about commissions, we've just launched a new product in the commission space because, in talking with our agents and brokers, we found it's an area that is usually the most frustration for them, but also the area of the business they pay the least attention to. And you would think that, it's money coming in the door. But it's one of those areas that they're doing mental math, right? And I know I sold this and my check was X month last month. It should be about this month, and okay, yeah, it all figured out about right. The reality is when we actually sat down and started looking at how carriers pay commissions, we found on average about 30% of the time there is an inaccuracy in the compensation. Now, it cuts both ways. Sometimes they pay a little more than they're supposed to, which, hey, no one's going to probably pick up the phone and call the carrier and say,
I can
hey,
live
guess
with
what?
that
You paid me
mistake.
more. But more often than not, it cuts the other way. And they underpay by a little bit. And it's usually a clerical or administrative reason. It's not, malicious or intentional. But agents don't have a clean way to capture that. And so we have spent the last several years developing a really slick commissions reconciliation platform and engine that is designed to really predict what you as an agent are supposed to earn, not only this commission cycle, but looking out, 6, 8, 10, 12 months, looking at your book of business. What is your persistency, right? Versus new business. Are you just churning or are you actually growing your book, right? These kind of things, if you ask most brokers, they'd go, yeah, it's growing. But if I ask you, what are you going to be paid November of next month based upon your current book, your current churn rate, and your predicted sell-through, they'd go, hopefully more. So that's a product that we're super excited about that we've rolled out with a number of agencies that are really starting to see some amazing traction on their commission side.
I didn't have any plan to talk to you about this, but I got to ask another question on that because that's really, I agree with you that, most of the time the agents don't see the need to spend 2 or 3 days looking at their commissions when they could be trying to be out selling. So having something like this, the value is huge. Do you have to be currently using the Quotit platform in its entirety, or is this an add-in that could work to some other system? How's that process?
It's designed to play best when we know what's happening, meaning like we know when enrollments are happening or sales or transactions. However, that being said, it is a completely separate standalone capable platform. So you can, rather than getting automated data feeds from our enrollment system, you can upload your enrollments, or you can grab a file from a carrier site, it'll parse it and bring it into the system, accordingly. So it is something completely separate and aside.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, look, just a few more questions. I know we're getting close on time here, but kind of asking you more about the future from an enrollment standpoint.
Sure.
What kind are we looking at? What big changes do you see coming maybe in the next 5 to 10 years from a technology standpoint? I know we have AI's kind of really making, it's been out, but it's really kind of hitting things right now. What do you see taking place that the average person may not be thinking about?
So I think there's probably a couple of trends that we could look at from kind of a future, what do things look like? One of them I would say is data prefill. Using third-party data sources, whether that is regulatory data from CMS, whether it's things like Blue Button or FLIR or other areas, to inform the shopping experience, and that's going to be around plan recommendation engines, right? And so we're working with some companies that are doing some really cool things around mashing up our health plan data with claims data, PBM data, and throwing kind of an AI model behind it to, in essence, kind of give a bell curve fit of plans for a consumer. And I think that's going to be a disruptive technology for agents specifically, because the majority of sales we know are done by agents today, and the consumers pick up the phone and they talk to an agent that's a trusted advisor who knows their scenario, right? Who knows their background, knows their history, knows where they've been with the last couple of years, and can make a plan recommendation, right? And there's been a number of attempts over the years to disintermediate the broker, whether it's on the group side or the individual market, through things like plan recommendation. The reason we've partnered with these companies is because they have really focused on it as a broker empowerment tool. One of them, specifically, is actually huge in the fintech side and doing risk management around investments, and the way that they've used external data and AI to profile risk. Well, ultimately, insurance is a risk hedge. And so looking at things from an investment standpoint along with insurance to say, how do we best position your risk hedging? And so I think that's an area that we're going to see some really cool things coming on in the next 5 to 10 years. I would say, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was just going to say, I had another question even too on that from, risk from agents. And I think you had a great one right there. You can use AI and the technology and everything else, and it can look at all the data and process it instantly and give a better recommendation. I mean, it is, you have to be up on the technology and be using it to be able to stay in front of the customer. Because if you don't have that, it puts you at a negative advantage, So that's. I appreciate you saying that. Go ahead. You were going to say something else.
That I'm going to say is a positive, I think, for the agent community, where technology can enhance productivity, bring a better consumer experience. The other side of it is, what I'll call kind of a cautionary tale of where some technology is going. And we've already seen this from the regulatory standpoint on Medicare this year, where, call recording requirements coming in. I believe ultimately we'll see a convergence of much of the Medicare regs with the ACA regs, so that in essence it's the same whether you're enrolling a over or under 65 individual. Right now is call recordings. Very quickly on that heel will be transcription. And behind that, it's going to be sentiment analysis and keyword matching to ensure that from a sales process, things were compliant, the words that were used, they'll start red flagging. From an agent perspective, I do believe that those calls are going to have to start being, randomly polled, and they're going to go through a sentiment engine like a Clarabridge or something like that to specifically score a call. And I believe agents are going to start being scored on their interactions, especially in the ACA market, the Medicare market, and those kind of things, from a AI standpoint. And before it was, hey, we're going to pull one or two calls. I believe within the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be in a world where every call is transcribed, every call is sentiment analyzed, and every call is scored. And regulatory actions will either be taken or not based upon an agent scoring.
Wow, that's something. So basically, every call will have to be recorded. It will be transcribed, and that transcription will be monitored by an AI device of some sort that then goes back and scores you as the agent 1 to 10 on if you handled that call correctly, said the right thing, make sure you didn't use a word like it's the best plan or something along those lines. And then you'll have a score maybe tied to your name with CMS on how you do from an enrollment standpoint. Did I understand that correctly?
That's where I believe we'll start to see it go. And now that may sound a little bit, far-fetched, but I think that is where we're going to start seeing things go from a regulatory oversight standpoint.
My compliance officer would love to hear that.
Right? See, it's the trade-off, right? You got the agent on the other side going, no, I don't want that. Compliance officer going, yes, please. So, yeah.
Well, look, kind of thinking last question here, kind of thinking about the future, and obviously you guys are already doing this, but from a paper enrollment standpoint, are you seeing in the next 5 to 10 years paper enrollments being gone with majority of carriers, or what do you see on that front?
Yeah, so I think because the way that certain regulations are written, to handle unbanked or non-compute populations, we're still going to continue to see paper apps. They're going to exist. Carriers, I think, will begin, especially in the markets they can control, off exchange, those kind of things, mandating, dictating, those type of enrollments. I think another area that it will be a long curve before we get there will certainly be that group market. Where you've got the 500 guys at the steel plant working. They're going to fill out a paper app and turn it into their HR team, and it's going to be that way, I think, for a while, just because the nature of the environment. And what is the last census? Over 54% of Americans still receive coverage, or they receive coverage through their employer. So, individual market, off exchange, yeah, I can see that going away. Medicare, absolutely, they're going to start pushing there eventually. But I think for a lot of them, there's still always going to be that paper as an option.
Well, I can tell you for us, everything you said, 100% accurate, even for kind of how we see it as well. As individual right now, we're requiring all of our individual applications to come in electronically. However, when it comes to groups, we allow paper on all that and, different processing requirements. So, and it just makes sense. For a $20, $30 policy, you can't have that much paper and mail, or your percentage of cost starts going up so drastically for individual policies, where it's different with groups. So, well, Chad, man, anything else you want to say before we kind of wrap up the call today? You nailed it, man. I sure did like this. You did great.
No, Ryan, I appreciate the time to chat with you here and share a little bit about what we do and how we help support agents, carriers, and even a few minutes there at the end to stare into the crystal ball. And so I appreciate the time, Ryan. Thank you much.
Man, well, thank you, Chad. Well, look, for everyone on the podcast today, we thank you so much for listening in. Remember, a good plan today is better than a great plan months from now. Thank you very much.